Allah Yahweh Shemel Shai. Yahweh Shemel Shai. Barakatah Yahweh Shai. Barakatah Yahweh Shai.
Exodus 24:12. And the Lord said unto Moses, Come up to me into the mount, and be there, and I will give thee tables of stone, and a law, and commandments which I have written, that thou mayest teach them. And Moses rose up, and his minister Joshua. And Moses went up into the mount of God. And he said unto the elders, Tarry ye here for us, until we come again unto you. And, behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. If any man have any matters to do, let him come unto them. And Moses went up into the mount, and a cloud covered the mount, and the glory of the Lord abode upon Mount Sinai. And the cloud covered it 6 days. And the 7th day he called unto Moses out of the midst of the cloud. And the sight of the glory of the Lord was like devouring fire on the top of the mount in the eyes of the children of Israel. And Moses went into the midst of the cloud, and gat him up into the mount. And Moses was in the mount 40 days and 40 nights.
Yahweh Shemel Shai. Yahweh Shemel Shai. Barakatah Yahweh Shai. Barakatah Yahweh. Barakatah Yahweh. Barakatah Yahweh Shai.
Is Mount Sinai, the mountain of God, real? Why hasn't mainstream archaeology taken Mount Sinai seriously? Because for 1,500 years we've been looking at the wrong place. St. Catherine's Monastery, the alleged Mount Sinai site, has no archaeologic evidence to support it. But just 300 kilometers to the east is Jabal el-Lawz, which is potentially the real Mount Sinai. Not only does this mountain appear to have been burned by some kind of heat that melts rocks, it is surrounded by geologic and archaeologic evidence that supports the biblical narrative of the Exodus. Following the path out of Egypt that Moses and the Jewish people could have taken, the Exodus trail begins at the Gulf of Aqaba, where the Israelites were stuck between a rock and a hard place. Technically, rocks in a wet place. On one side, a mountain with the only entry blocked off by the Pharaoh's army, and the other side, the Red Sea. Imaging of the sea floor at the crossing point shows a traversable and gradual decline into the sea. Not a land bridge, but also not a cliff that they couldn't navigate. And in antiquity, this site was known to be the crossing point. The Jewish king Solomon erected markers on both sides of the sea at this crossing point. One of them still exists to this day. After the Red Sea, the Jewish people camped at the Palms of Elim.
And they came to Elim, where were 12 wells of water, and 70 palm trees.
After Elim was the miracle at the rock in Horeb.
Behold, I will stand before thee there upon the rock in Horeb, and thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink.
Here's what we would want to see to validate that it's the real rock in Horeb. It would need to be identifiable near Mount Sinai and have evidence that water flowed from it. This rock is massive. It sits atop a hill and sticks out like a sore thumb. And even though this is a desert climate, there are clear signs of erosion. Next stop, the altar to the golden calf. Imagine this. They had just seen God split the Red Sea and then split the rock at Horeb. Now they're watching Moses on Mount Sinai that's on fire. And what do they do to celebrate? They build an altar to a golden calf and party. At the base of Mount Sinai is an altar made of rock, and it appears to have been erected as an altar to the golden calf. There's even what appears to be Egyptian hieroglyphics of a calf inscribed on the rocks that make up the altar. And now we get to the actual mountain itself. From the base of the mountain, you can see the charred rock at the peak of the mountain. And upon closer inspection, the rocks appear to be melted. What would cause rocks on the top of a mountain to melt? Is it possible that it was the presence of God that did this to these rocks? Can you imagine?
Moses, Moses, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem Kakwadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to his younger brothers, and peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful elect out there pushing this word and truth and in sincerity across the four winds. In the name of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem Rakakwadash, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners who have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai. All right, and but I want to get into the day, dealing with, morning news and prophecy, is dealing with how the middle class, okay, the middle class is being finished off. All right, for the longest, the devil, for decades, the devil has been attacking, the middle class. Okay, and you go into the middle class, and there's really a creation of policies of FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, with the New Deal, and the New Deal created a strong middle class, mainly for Edomites. Okay, and even in that, there was a play, all right, to get people dependent and trusting in government. Okay, when the economy, was of course it was always corruption. Of course, that devil, was amongst, the inner circle, all right, and then being puppeted by the elites. Okay, and there was always corruption in the economy. Okay, but the common American Edomite, and even Jakes, were able. Few Jakes were able to thrive. Jake always, cracked the cement, everywhere. It'd be all right. But yeah, even back then though, you had a better the common Edomite got a better shake. The economy, as production went up, wages went up. You had your unions, you had your 40-day, you had your overtime, different benefits, overtime pay, came out of the New Deal, the time and a half, a few things you can look into. We went into it before, all right, but it made a strong middle class, okay, to one job in the house, all right, was able to pay for a house, all right, own a house, all right, have a car too, okay, have savings, all right. He was able to go on vacation, all right, and he was able to feed a family 3, 4, 5 off of one income. The minimum wage, was set up to make sure that at the minimum, okay, you had enough for your essentials if you worked at a job, all right, and those things have been heavily distorted, okay, but it made America look like, the place to be. It made America look like that golden society, okay, and the elites, used it as to show, why these other nations should take on democracy. All right, but ultimately it was a Trojan horse. The American strong middle class was nothing but a Trojan horse, for America, all right, to establish itself throughout the earth, make it look like that model nation of how to be. And what did these elites do, man? They put these nations in debt with their dollar system, okay? And they broke down the morality of these nations. Matter of fact, we'll get into some of these things, okay? Let's go here. All right, what you got a thing called the booming 50s, post World War II economics, was off the charts for America, man. American families, okay, they were winning. You see? So come on now. Oh boy. Hold on. Let's see. Hold on. Let's go here. But yeah, that was a time. Server time out. Come on, man. It's a lucky. Yeah, that was a time when America did get all right, the American families did get a small slice of the American pie. Okay. Got to be kidding. Hold on, let's go here. Let's go here. What's wrong with the blue guy? Let's go here. So let's go to the book of Jeremiah, chapter 50. Maybe 51. Okay. But you go back to, the time after, especially after the war, when the American dollar was a Federal Reserve, it had all this spending power. Okay. I say industry was booming, manufacturing was booming in America. All right. But what did they do? They ran it in America. Okay. And modeled it, for these other nations. It was like the elites put a beautiful dress on America. Okay, and modeled it for the nations because the elites are America's pimp. Okay, so they put on this beautiful dress, this great middle class, this thriving middle class. They modeled it for the nations. Okay, and they was able to take, and sell their model to these other nations. Matter of fact, Babylon had been a golden cup, and the golden cup means because gold goes into what being number one. All right, being the highest or the highest, man. Gold, the most precious and coveted, metal, precious metal on the earth. Okay, so Babylon had been a golden cup in the Lord's hand, and it was filled with what? Filled with wine. Okay, capitalism, democracy, but then also came what? Satanism. You see, the governments of the different nations selling out their people, okay, to this elite banking system, okay, that puts them in forever debt. It said they made all the earth drunken. Okay, they made all the earth, all right, drunken, man. And the nations have gotten drunken off this golden cup. They looked at America as, hey, this is the way to go. There's no other way outside of this, man. We got to get on. Okay, the nations have drunk enough of wine. Therefore, all right, the nations are mad. You see, the nations are mad. These economies are failing. Okay, inflation, starvation, currencies collapse. And see, these other currencies collapse all the time. You see, the dollar has been strong and dominant because the dollar is meant to extrapolate wealth from these other nations, not to enrich the middle class or enrich these nations, okay, or for the people of these other nations. No, it's meant to extrapolate wealth, man. That's the whole thing of the dollar. But they brought the dollar to these other nations with the Trojan horse. Like, look, see how good American middle classes are? We want to bring that here. Okay? But what else do they bring, man? American culture, which is Satanism. Okay? Christianity, which is rooted back to Satanism, where you really go into it under the devil. Okay? And then you go here. Let's get this in the book of Nahum. All right. Let's go here to the book of Nahum, chapter 3. All right, this is the book of Nahum, chapter 3. In verse 4, it said, because of the multitude of the whoredoms of the well-favored harlot, the mysteries of witchcraft that sell a nation through her whoredoms and her families through her witchcraft. Okay? Is well-favored harlot, because for the longest time, America has been this well-favored harlot in the earth. The least had America on their whole scroll, man. Okay? To these other nations. All right? And the other nations brought in. Okay? Well, it came with witchcraft. Even this whole money thing, man, is witchcraft, man. You see, they sell the nation through her whoredoms, man. Okay? So America had these other nations turning tricks for the elites, man. Okay? And families, these ruling families. All right? These other peoples. But mainly, you go into all these nations, they all have oligarchs, man. They get rich off this system while the masses suffer and become what? Slaves for the elites, man. Okay? Through this current, economic system, he has made people debt slaves, man. And this devil wants to take it a step further and make people digital debt slaves, man. Okay? So what he just has off the charts control, man. You see, he want to take it up a notch, man. You see? And it's very childish how this man runs the earth, man. You know, the things that he intentionally does in the earth, man, is extremely childish, man. When you go here real quick, we'll get that. And then I got a video I want to segue to. But when you go to Haggai chapter 1, okay. Let's see. Where's Haggai? Might be Habakkuk 1. Let me see. I believe it's Habakkuk 1. Okay. Yep. Yeah, let's go through here and read this. So this is the book of Habakkuk chapter 1. All right. And verse 6 it says, "For lo, I raise up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, which shall march through the breadth of the land to possess the dwelling places that are not theirs." Man, and these devils, you know, they took this show on the road. Okay. And they come in, you know, because America has a lot of tactics, man. You know, they can use soft power, you know, get your leaders to sell out, take the deal. Okay, begin to set up, you know, industry, industrialize, you know, these nations. Okay, make them get on board with your dollar. Okay, because once you get industrialized as a nation, okay, you have to begin to what you get a lot of oil. Okay, and what's linked to that oil? The petrodollar, man. So now you need the dollar because you're going to industrialize. You know, a lot of these nations go from an agrarian society where majority of their economy is agriculture. Okay, but this devil brings in this commercial, all right, industrial, all right, blueprint. Okay, he brings in this industrial commercial, okay, style of economy. Okay, and what happens? You need a lot of oil because now you're manufacturing, you know, and doing these different things okay, and you're manufacturing to sell, all right, your resources on a global scale. All right, and this nigga's getting the majority of the cut. All right, but it's so much money being made, you know, he can make the elites and the governments of these nations, government officials of these nations, wealthy, man. Okay, or he can do hard power and just come through with straight military, man. Demonize. If your leader don't want to sell out, you just demonize them, all right, and just come through with the with the hammer, okay, which is the military, man. You see, it said that they are terrible and dreadful. Their judgment and their dignity shall proceed of themselves. Their horses are swifter than the leopards and are more fierce than the evening wolves. And their horsemen shall spread themselves. All right, they're military. That's why you had all these bases everywhere, all these different conflicts going on at the same time. All these just everywhere, man. And the leopard is swift, you know, because he's did this after World War II, man. America really, all right, built the empire, man. You know, America really, you know, forwarded its interest and influence throughout the earth, man. It became an empire, man. All right, to where the governments of the world was submitted to the American government. A lot of these different governments, okay, was submitted to the American government, man. It says, "And their horsemen shall spread themselves, and their horsemen shall come from far. They shall fly as the eagle that hasted to eat." It says, They shall come off of violence, their faces shall sop up the east wind, and they shall gather the captivity as the wind. I mean, it's like as the sand. Okay? And this is what these devils have done, all right, unto the earth, man. Okay? So they fly as the eagle. You know, they're known for what? They're impeccable Air Force, you know, because America has the #1 Air Force, man. You know, and they're used to getting air superiority over these nations. All right, making these nations defenseless with overwhelming bombing. And then next thing you know, you got F-16, F-18s, and now F-35s flying over your top, man. You know? Now that's something they can't establish in Iran. This is why, you know, they're having such a time. Okay, but for the longest, man, the devil just come in and overwhelm you, do a few bombing campaigns for a few days. That's why they thought this thing was gonna be a few days, man, because this is how they usually get down. You see, American military used to finishing your ass off in a few days. The rest of the days are just victory laps. You know, just bombing your ass. All right, the smithereens. uh, why you smithereens? But you know, yeah, man. They used to having their air superiority, man, to where they just flying over you, you know, unhindered and just going crazy on your ass, man. You know, making these nations tap out. You know, but they're not able to do this now in Iran because the Lord finna shift this thing, man. Well, this war gonna work against them. Okay, and it says they shall come all for violence. Their faces shall sup up the east wind, and they shall gather the captivity as the sand, man. And this is what they've done. You know, they put people enslaved, all right, to this debt of these bankers, man. Okay, and the American population is no different. They just dressed it up real good in America, man, with a lot of entertainment, a lot of convenience. Okay, well, Americans are no more than debt slaves, man. Okay, and it's getting worse and worse. And you see, people are trying to, you know, people's hope is that they can somehow get back to that, you know, that era where the middle class, all right, was thriving. You know, this is what the devil, you know, is attempting to do. I mean, this is what these common Edomites, these common people in America, all right, they want just a piece of that American golden age back, and they'll be okay. All right, but this devil, he's going to bring nothing but more pressure with the promise of something better than that American golden age through the form of that sea hip. Okay, well, let's go here real quick. Let's go here to Ecclesiastes. All right, there's the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 10. All right, Ecclesiastes 10 and 16 says, woe to thee, O land, when thy king is a child, and thy princes eat in the morning. You know, woe to thee, O land, when thy king is a child, and thy princes eat in the morning. Okay, this man is a child. His very child is how this man runs the earth, man. You know, to all these systems is built around keeping people, you know, impoverished, man. Okay, and dependent on him. You know, this man wants to hoard up all the resources and then redistribute it, okay, as he see fits. Okay, he's a child, man, and that prince is eating the morning, which he's only concerned about him and these few families. Okay, these few oligarch families that run the earth, man. That's the only thing this devil was concerned about, man. Okay, that's why he eat in the morning, which means his priority is himself. Okay, he's an unfit ruler, man, and that's why we're saying, you know, the Lord has allowed this man to embark on this war that's gonna end his ass, man. In his mind, he's gonna double down, okay, on his rulership. Okay, in his mind, he think he's finna dismantle and tighten the screws, okay, on his rulership. Dismantle his old one, all right, and bring a more tighter rulership, man. Okay, a rulership of more control. You see, what he's done now is not enough. He has to do more. He needs more control. You see? So let's go here. All right. And these devils want our birth, right? Okay. And in their version is extremely wicked version of our birthright, man. Okay. So let's go here. All right, let's get to the video and just see. He go into a lot of info. So let's play this.
The middle class isn't dying. It's already dead. What you're watching right now is the autopsy. Most people believe the middle class is shrinking because of automation or globalization or lazy millennials who won't stop buying avocado toast. That's the story you're supposed to believe. Here's the truth. The middle class is being dissolved deliberately through a mechanism so elegant, so invisible that most of its victims cheer for the very system that's draining them dry. In 1971, a decision was made in the Oval Office that quietly rewired the economic nervous system of the entire Western world. It didn't make headlines, it didn't cause riots, but it planted a slow poison inside every paycheck, every mortgage, every retirement account in America, and the bill is coming due right now. Open any economics textbook published before 1975, and you'll find a simple, beautiful promise embedded in every chapter. Work harder, be more productive, watch your wages rise to match. For 100 years, that promise held. From 1948 to 1973, productivity in the United States rose 96.7%. Median hourly compensation up 91.3%. Nearly a perfect one-to-one relationship. You produce more, you earn more. The deal was simple and it was real. Then something broke. Between 1979 and 2022, productivity in the American economy grew by 64.6%. You would expect wages to have roughly followed. They didn't. Real hourly compensation for non-supervisory workers grew just 17.3% over the same period. Read that again. 64% increase in productivity, 17% increase in wages. The gap between those two numbers, that chasm, is the middle class graveyard. That's where 40 years of prosperity went to disappear. Where did it go? The Economic Policy Institute tracked it. Since 1979, the top 1% of earners captured 38% of all income growth in America. The bottom 90%, 15%. If wage growth had simply kept pace with productivity since 1979, the median full-time worker in America today would be earning roughly $10,000 more per year than they currently are. That's not a rounding error. That's a house down payment. That's a year of college tuition. That's the difference between a retirement account and a retirement crisis. Here's the historical parallel that nobody talks about in this context. In Victorian England, between 1780 and 1840, the Industrial Revolution produced one of the most dramatic productivity explosions in human history. Britain's industrial output doubled, then doubled again. The factory owners became fabulously wealthy. And the workers, real wages for ordinary English laborers, declined during the first 50 years of the Industrial Revolution, even as the nation exploded with productive capacity. Historians call it the Engels Pause, named after Friedrich Engels, who documented factory life in Manchester and couldn't reconcile what he saw with what economic theory predicted. Production was soaring. Workers were starving. The gains were real. They were just being captured somewhere else. We are living through a second Engels pause. And just like the first one, it's not an accident. The divergence we see today begins to appear precisely at the moment that two things happen simultaneously. American corporations gained the legal infrastructure to offshore production, and the financialization of the economy began. When you can move your factory to Mexico, labor loses its leverage. When stock buybacks become your primary business strategy, shareholders win and workers lose. The divorce between productivity and wages isn't an economic mystery. It's a power shift. One side of the negotiating table got stronger and the other side got gutted. The middle class didn't fail. The deal they were promised was quietly revoked. Here's the mechanism that almost nobody talks about, the one that makes the productivity theft look almost quaint by comparison. His name was Richard Cantillon, an Irish-French banker writing in 1730, nearly 3 centuries before anyone would need his insights this badly. His observation was deceptively simple. When new money enters an economy, it doesn't affect everyone equally. It flows unevenly. The first people to receive the new money benefit massively. The last people to receive it, after prices have already risen, are made worse off. The bankers win. The savers lose. The early receivers thrive. The late receivers pay the tab. Most people know this effect abstractly. What they don't understand is that the American middle class has been systematically engineered into the last receiver position for 50 consecutive years. Here's how it works today. The Federal Reserve creates money, call it quantitative easing, call it asset purchases, call it emergency liquidity facilities. The terminology changes. The mechanism doesn't. Newly created money flows first into the banking system, then into financial assets, then into real estate, then into corporate earnings, then maybe into wages for the people who actually do the work. Between 2009 and 2020, the Federal Reserve expanded its balance sheet from $900 billion to $7 trillion. In the same period, the S&P 500 tripled, the Dow quintupled. Housing prices in major metros climbed 60, 80, even 120% in cities like San Francisco, Denver, and Seattle. This looks like wealth creation. It isn't. It's wealth redistribution wearing a tuxedo. Now, here's the brutal detail hiding inside the data. According to the Federal Reserve's own survey of consumer finances, the top 10% of American households own approximately 87% of all stocks and mutual funds. The bottom 50% own less than 1%. So when quantitative easing pumps trillions into asset prices, 90% of that windfall flows to the top 10% of the population. The middle class, which owns some stock through their 401s, but whose primary asset is usually their home and their labor, gets a diluted version of the gains and the full version of the costs. The full version of the costs looks like this: food prices up, energy prices up, healthcare premiums up, childcare up, the things you can't opt out of, the actual substance of a middle class life, rising faster than wages, faster than returns on the modest savings the middle class actually holds. This is the Cantillon trap. It isn't a bug. By the time you receive the new money through your paycheck, your savings account, your marginally higher Social Security check, inflation has already eaten the benefit. You're the person at the end of the line. You get the water after everyone else has already drunk from it. But the story gets worse, because the Cantillon trap only describes the mechanism. The destination is something else entirely. The OECD's 2019 report, Under Pressure, The Squeezed Middle Class, documented this across 20 member countries. Middle-class households now spend a higher share of their income on housing, healthcare, and education than they did 30 years ago. They have lower financial buffers than their parents had, and their confidence that their children will be better off than they are has collapsed to its lowest level since the data began being collected. The middle class isn't just poorer, they're more precarious. The psychological experience of middle-class life, which used to mean security, stability, the ability to absorb a setback without catastrophe, has been replaced with a chronic low-level financial terror that most families are simply too exhausted to name. Branko Milanovic, the World Bank economist who spent 30 years mapping global inequality, put it cleanly: the hollowing out of the middle class in rich countries is not a side effect of globalization. It is one of its central products. He documented the famous elephant curve of global income growth, showing that between 1988 and 2008, the global poor gained, the global ultra-rich gained enormously, and the middle class of developed nations gained almost nothing. The elephant's trunk reaches the sky for the billionaires at the top. The body of the elephant sags for everyone else. There's a specific quality to the middle class collapse that makes it different from ordinary poverty. It's not that people are starving. It's that the three pillars of middle class life, the things that used to define what the middle class was, have been systematically repriced out of reach. We'll start with housing. In 1970, the median home price in America was approximately 2.2 times the median annual household income. You could, with discipline and a few years of saving, buy a house. The math was hard, but not impossible. By 2024, the median home price had reached 5.6 times median household income. In coastal cities, the ratio is closer to 10 or 12 to 1. And with mortgage rates climbing above 7% through 2023 and 2024, the monthly payment on a median-priced home had become the largest single monthly payment in recorded American history as a share of income. For the first time since the Great Depression, renting is cheaper than owning across most major American markets. The home ownership dream, which was not just a financial strategy, but the cultural definition of middle-class membership, is being foreclosed upon not by a single crisis, but by the slow arithmetic of unaffordability. The healthcare wall is more lethal. A 2024 Kaiser Family Foundation report documented that the average annual premium for employer-sponsored family coverage in the United States had reached $23,968. The employee's share of that cost, what comes out of your paycheck before you see a dime, was $6,296. For a household earning $75,000 a year, that's 8.4% of gross income before seeing a doctor, before paying a deductible, before paying a copay, before paying for any prescription medication. In 1960, healthcare consumed 5% of American GDP. Today, it consumes 18%. That additional 13% didn't come from nowhere. It came from wages that didn't rise, from benefits that weren't offered, from the quiet extraction that happens when a system designed for profit sits between you and your survival. Then there's education. The U.S. Census Bureau tracks something called the college wage premium, the income advantage that a college degree provides over a high school diploma. The premium grew from roughly $7,000 per year in 1980 to over $30,000 per year by 2022. A college degree became, financially, almost mandatory for middle-class membership. And the price of that degree? In 1980, 4 years at a public university. By 2024, the figure exceeded $100,000. The credential became more necessary and simultaneously 10 times more expensive. The American middle class is now spending its entire existence running to stay in place. Housing costs more. Healthcare costs more. Education costs more. The three things that middle-class status was supposed to purchase, stability, health, and a future for your children, have been repriced as luxury goods. The French historian Guy Debord wrote in 1967 about what he called the society of the spectacle, the idea that modern capitalism sells people the image of prosperity, even as the substance of it is withdrawn. We have arrived at the economic version of this. The middle class in America still exists as an identity, as a self-description, as a political category, as a material reality, a class of people with genuine financial security and upward mobility. It is increasingly a memory dressed up as a present tense. The most elegant trick the system ever pulled was this. When it stopped paying workers enough to afford middle-class life, it handed them a credit card instead. From 1945 to 1975, consumer debt in America was modest. Families borrowed to buy homes, occasionally to buy cars. Total consumer debt hovered around 40% of disposable personal income. It was an accelerant on real earnings, not a substitute for them. Then wages stalled and credit expanded, and the two curves crossed in the 1980s. By 2007, total household debt reached 130% of disposable personal income, the highest level ever recorded. Families weren't getting richer. They were borrowing against futures that hadn't been earned yet. The Roman historian Livy documented a practice from the early republic called nexum, a form of debt bondage where a man who couldn't repay his creditor could be taken into servitude until the debt was worked off. The Romans eventually abolished it in 326 BC because the volume of citizens being enslaved for debt was destabilizing the republic. We did not abolish nexum. We digitized it and named it APR. The average American household in 2025 carries approximately $103,000 in total debt. Break that down. Mortgage debt? Yes, but also $20,000 in student loans, $6,000 in car loans, $6,500 in credit card debt.
And that's what you call a debt slave. All right, real quick, let's get this. We'll go back to it. And that's what you call a debt slave, man. And this is what these devils, have created. All right, let's go here. And these devils plan on taking this to a whole nother level with the digital system, man. Okay, this is Proverbs 22:7 saying the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Okay, so this is the system that he set up to where the rich, all right, rule over the poor through debt. Okay, so you have these elite families that are able to rule over the people of the earth because they keep people in constant debt. So now people have to trade their labor to try to pay off the debt. You see, it's a system where it needs debt. All right. And this digital system, is a system to where, they're just going to ration you your life. All right. Through digital credits. Okay. Through permission. It's going to be a permission based, and they're already conditioning people because right now, what do you have to do? You got to subscribe to everything. Everything is a subscription. Okay. So with the digital system, they plan on owning all the resources, and you're not owning anything. Okay. And this man's agenda with the New World Order, he plans on no one owning anything. Okay. And he distributes your life to you how he see fit. Then he's a social credit score. So according to your behavior, your life is distributed to you. So he wants to take this on a whole nother level, man. He wants to take a debt slave to a whole nother level, man. Okay. It's just real wicked how this man runs the earth, man. I think it's some more in here. Yeah, let's go here. Proverbs 22. Rob not the poor because he is poor. And this is all the devil does. And he keeps people poor because that keeps people vulnerable. And he's able to prey on it. He's able to extrapolate labor from that. Okay, he's able to extrapolate control from that, from people being poor. Okay, and you don't have to be in, in the soup line, okay, or living in a cardboard box to be poor. No, if you have to go in debt, okay, to maintain yourself, well, you're poor, which most of the world is, man. Okay, if you gotta go into debt to sustain yourself, you are part of the poor. Okay, that means that your labor by itself isn't cutting it anymore. Okay, so you got to take on debt, and now you're stuck, you're locked into this contract of servitude to try to pay it off. Okay, and it's never enough. And like I said, just a well-designed, all right, hamster wheel. He just dressed up the hamster wheel, but it's a hamster wheel, man. Okay, you get the convenience. Okay, you got the nightlife. You have all this access to particular things. Okay, but it's still a dressed up a hamster wheel, and the more you want, the more you desire. All right, and a lot of people go into debt to maintain this certain lifestyle, and okay, because the more you desire here, the more you're enslaved to this man's system, man. And it's created like that. You can desire all you want. It's just gonna require you to be tapped in more into the system. Okay, it's just gonna make you to where you have to be more committed to the system. It said, neither oppress the afflicted in the gate, for the Lord will plead their cause and spoil the soil of those that spoiled them. Okay, and that's gonna be for the Israelites, man, because we get it the worst. You see, we at the bottom of this system, man. Okay, but the Lord's getting ready to plead the cause, all right, for the sake of the elect of Israel. All right, and tear this whole system down. This war is going to tear this system down, and it's not going to be rebuilt, man. Okay, he's going to begin, to try to reestablish himself, and then the Lord's going to intervene and tear this shit down, man, because this is wicked, man. Here it is. This world order is wicked. You think you're going to build another one that's even more wicked, man? Lord, going to tear this shit down, man. Okay, so let's go back to the video.
Charging an average interest rate of 22.8%. The credit card interest rate alone, 22.8%, is not a market rate. It's a punitive rate. It's the rate you charge people who have no other options. Here's the mechanism that makes this a trap and not just a burden. When you're servicing high interest debt, every dollar you earn gets processed through the financial system before it reaches your life. You work, you pay taxes, you pay debt service. What remains is your actual standard of living. And as debt grows and wages stagnate, that remainder shrinks, while the family's sense of financial pressure expands into every crevice of their existence. Thomas Piketty's central finding in Capital in the 21st century was elegantly brutal. When the rate of return on capital, what money earns when invested, exceeds the rate of economic growth, what wages earn through work, inequality compounds automatically. The rich get richer not because they work harder, but because they have capital that earns more than labor does. The middle class, which earns primarily through labor and holds primarily liabilities rather than assets, falls further behind every year simply by standing still. Piketty examined French inequality data going back to 1700. He found that the relatively egalitarian period of 1930 to 1980, the era that created the middle class as a mass phenomenon, was the historical anomaly, not the norm. The norm, the baseline state of capitalist economies when left to their own devices, is extreme concentration. The middle class was created by political choices, progressive taxation, union protections, housing subsidies, GI bills, regulated financial systems, and it is being destroyed by the reversal of those choices. The World Inequality Database now tracks this in real time. In 1980, the bottom 50% of Americans held approximately 4% of national wealth. By 2023, they held 2.3%. The top 1% held 22% of wealth in 1980. By 2023, they held 38.7%. The middle isn't just squeezed, it's being compressed toward the bottom. Here's the thing about slow collapses. They're invisible until they're undeniable. The Roman silver coin didn't denounce its own debasement. It just got lighter year by year until one morning a merchant in Alexandria picked up a denarius and scratched the surface and watched the silver flake away, revealing the bronze underneath. By then, the damage was complete. We are in the flaking silver moment of the American middle class. The productivity gains were real. The prosperity was real. But the coin was being debased through wage suppression, through asset inflation that only the wealthy could harvest, through a credit system that replaced earnings with borrowing and called it growth. The data doesn't leave much room for comfort. Pew Research Center found that in 1971, 61% of American adults lived in middle-income households. By 2023, that number had fallen to 50%. A majority became a minority in 50 years, and the households that left the middle tier didn't all go up. Roughly equal numbers went down. You came into this video thinking the middle class was dying because of forces nobody controlled. What you know now is different. The mechanisms were specific, the timing was deliberate, and the people at the top of the Cantillon chain, the first receivers of every new dollar the Fed creates, knew exactly what they were doing when they built it. The question that should keep you up at night isn't whether the middle class will survive. It's whether the people running the system want it to. If this cracked something open for you, if what you just watched felt less like a video and more like finding a map you should have had years ago, subscribe. This channel exists.
Yeah, man, and that's why the Lord finna come change the rulership at the top. Okay, because these devils, they want to take this to another level. Okay, when you go here, let's get this. And that's why the Lord says, you know, except the Lord shorten the days, man. Okay, because this devil, he wants to take this wicked system, all right, this current wicked system, and upgrade it to a digital, all right, wicked system of more control, man. Okay, so we have to be thankful that the Lord has it to where, you know, this devil's enterprise is going to fail. Okay, let's go here. Matter of fact, let's go to Sirach since we're here. So we go to the book of Sirach, chapter 10. All right, start at 1. It says, a wise judge will instruct his people, and the government of a prudent man is well ordered. And see, this is the exact opposite, man. Okay, this is anything but an ordered kingdom, man. You see, it's a kingdom of oppression. Okay, this is a rulership of oppression, man. You know, why would you want, you know, people to starve? You're already ruling over them. They're already, all right, subjugated to your system, to your government. Okay, to your law. They're already subjugated. You see, why do you have to, you know, impoverish? Okay, and just continue to take, man. Why? Because he is never satisfied, as the scriptures say. Okay, it says, as the judge of the people is himself, so are his officers. And what manner of man the ruler of the city is, such are all they that dwell therein. Okay, and this is why you have a society full of scammers and schemers. Okay, this is why you have a society where people just looking to devour one another. How can they get off? How can they get out? Okay, how can they get over? You see, the whole society is like that now. All right, so you have from the elite governments to all these corporations to all these different businesses and institutions. Everybody's getting over. You know, insurance companies and everything you can think of where transactions happen. All right, the majority of it is people getting over. You know, everything you do is has some type of scam or fine print in it, man. All right, and this is the society that this man has created. Says an unwise king destroyed his people, but through the prudence of them which are in authority, the city shall be inhabited, man. Okay, the city shall be inhabited. All right. So we're in the time now that that the Heavenly Father, all right, we read verse 4. It said the power of the earth is in the hand of the Lord. All right, it's in his authority. Okay, and he's giving the earth to the devil. The scriptures say the earth is given to the wicked, and the wicked are just doing what the wicked do, man. Okay, the power of the earth is given into the hand of the Lord, and in due time he will set one over that is profitable, man. The rulership of Yahweh Shai is going to be profitable to the earth. Okay, that's another thing. This man destroys the worth. It's like he destroys the earth to gain wealth. You know, he literally destroys the environment to try to gain wealth and control, wealth and power. You know, and the latest example there is the data centers, man. Okay, which he does that for a system of control. You know, because he needs these data centers to regulate AI. You know, and to run his AI, which he wants his new world order ran by AI, man. Okay, but nah, man, the Lord is finna stop in the midst of this, man. Because we in that due time where the Lord is going to set one over that is possible, okay, profitable, and that's Yahweh Shai. You see, the Lord getting ready to set one over the earth that is profitable, and that profitable is Yahweh Shai, man. Okay, he's that profitable one. Okay, and after 1,000 years of captivity, Esau is going to be done away with. The problem of the earth, the disease of the earth is going to be done away with. Okay, and these heathens, they will be able to enjoy righteous rulership, you know, under Israel, man. Okay, they're going to be forever tributaries and servants and subjugated, okay, to the law, you know, to our government, you know, Yahweh Shai, the first fruit. Okay, they're going to be subjugated to our whole nation, man. You know, every Israelite is going to be an overlord to these heathens, man. Have authority over these heathens. You see? So you jump down, and that's gonna be forever, man. All right, but they're gonna enjoy a righteous earth, man. You know, they're gonna enjoy real food, clean water. Okay, they're gonna get to you know, have substance. You know, hey, no system gonna be set up. You know, quantum easing and dividends and, you know, interest rates off the chain and all this whole, you know, or the capital, all right, predatory capitalism and all this. Okay, they're gonna be tributaries. Okay, but the earth is gonna be in abundance, man. And see, we're gonna be so off the charts in abundance, man, that the abundance. See, we're not like Esau. We're not gonna feel some type of way because the heathen has, you know, substance, man. You know, this devil, you know, scripture say he can never have enough, and his eyes stand out from fatness, man. He just wants everything. He wants his wealth, your wealth. Okay, he plays a zero-sum game to where, you know, either he wants it all and you have nothing. And this new world order is his ultimate zero-sum game to where he has everything and no one has nothing, and he distributes according to his liking, man. Which that's wicked, man. Okay, but in the kingdom, these heathens, they're going to be able to produce, okay, and create true wealth with his resources, man. Okay, and we're just gonna be on such another level. We're gonna have those new bodies. We're gonna be immortal. He didn't never tap into, all right, all right, what we got, man. Okay, but there's gonna be plenteous in the earth, man. After that 1,000 years, man. Okay, verse 8 said, because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. Okay, and that people is from Esau into Jacob, man. Okay, the wicked to the righteous, man. All right, from these elites to Yahweh Shai, the kingdom is going to be translated. You know, and we're in that time. All right, this war is going to lead us into this time. All right, with that great translation of kingdoms, man. Okay, so I'll leave it there. You know, Lord will, you brothers. All right, and you sisters edified once again. I'm gonna give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Makakadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers, and peace and blessings, salutation to the hopeful. Shalom.